Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear listeners and viewers. This is News and Views with myself, Aisha Kaji. As you know, we've been talking about Palestinian culture and particularly Palestinian tatreez, the art of Palestinian embroidery, which encompassed threads of identity, threads of history, threads of memory, threads of space and belonging. And now we're going to one of my very, very favorite guests. Gazan journalist Youmna El-Sayed, who we spoke to last year as well. And then, of course, she came to South Africa on a tour of South Africa. She is among my heroes, of the journalism world. When Gaza was under bombardment and genocide, for the first year of that genocide, Youmna was amongst those courageous journalists who really brought us the story from what was happening on the ground and changed the narrative helped change the narrative around the Palestinian ethnic cleansing in the West Bank and particularly the genocide in Gaza. She's an incredibly brave young woman. And she is, as I said, one of my favorite people. We're going to talk to her about what's happening in Palestine today. And before we do that, and also, of course, she's now living in Egypt. So from the diaspora as well, she's now a reporter for Al Jazeera English. And we're delighted, dear Youmna, to have you back with us again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for making the time.
Alaikum assalam, Aisha. It's always a pleasure to be on a show in Salam Media and especially speaking to you. It's always a pleasure for me. And thank you very much for that very kind introduction you just gave me there.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. As I said, you are an absolute hero in my book, and I'm glad that other people have begun to realize that. And on that note, we've seen just yesterday that after the pulling of the Gaza documentary from the BBC, you know, the Royal Television Society in England has withdrawn its decision to honor Palestinian journalists, particularly those from Gaza. So people like yourself, like Bisan Awad, like young Lama, like Mohammed Al-Kurd, Mossab Abu Toha, all of you were set to receive this joint award sent to Palestinians or given to Palestinian journalists reporting the genocide and the ethnic cleansing from the ground. What is your feeling about that? I tend to think there's a load of hypocrisy around it. They haven't really given an adequate explanation, but just if you would like to share your thoughts.
Well, Aisha, simply I've been speaking about this for this past entire year about the clear double standards and hypocrisy of the international journalism institutions towards the
Mm,
journalists of the Gaza Strip, and the fact that this decision has been made to not recognize Palestinian journalists working in Gaza for over 16 months, covering the worst genocide in modern history, while
mm,
other international journalists and Western journalists in particular were banned from entering the Gaza Strip, from covering this genocide, from practicing their practice as journalists. They were banned by Israel. And yet they were not able to fight back. They were not able to fight that banning and that decision that is a battle against freedom of speech that they have lectured the world about for years and years, and have criticized other communities and other governments for suppressing journalists and suppressing the freedom of speech. When it came to Israel, they were completely quiet about it and they were not able to battle this battle. Unlike Palestinian journalists, who, despite the displacement, the targeting, the threatening to them in person, to their families, they were there from day one.
mm,
And those who had to flee to protect their families continued in other ways to report about the genocide, continued in other ways to speak about the genocide, but they did not give up. And they
mhm,
endured circumstances that no other journalist or even human being in the world could have. And now
Absolutely.
they are not being recognized for their courage, their determination, their professionalism, their real standards and integrity of journalism that other Western and international journalism institutions and organizations were not able to practice. And I don't
Mm,
think that this action reflects anything that really affects the Palestinian journalists. On the
mhm,
contrary, it actually shows the weakness, the hypocrisy, and the double standards of such international organizations that have allowed themselves to be influenced and to be weakened to
mhm.
the point where another political decision could affect their integrity and their own decision and their own will.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think it's a really sad indictment of the Royal Television Society, frankly, and of the BBC. Now, Hamas has said that Israel has not delivered on its commitments under the Gaza truce to pull out from the Philadelphia corridor. That's the area between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. And UNRWA chief Lazzarini has rejected Israel's claim that other organizations could replace it in Gaza, stressing that only a Palestinian institution can do it. I know you still have relatives and friends in Gaza, and we see pictures now, Yumna, of people returning home to areas in Gaza that have been totally devastated and demolished, and yet very, very determined to rebuild, to remake a life there. Are you in touch with anybody in Gaza presently, and how are those efforts going? Because it does seem like a gargantuan task, especially amid Trump's bizarre vision for the enclave.
Well, of course, Aisha, as you just mentioned, I still do have family in Gaza, very close family members who are still there. Um, uh, Lots of my friends, neighbors, and colleagues are still in Gaza. The determination that Palestinians in Gaza to stay, that determination that they have, and that hope that they can rebuild is even being smashed and squashed day by day by the halt of any approval of entering any humanitarian aid to give them even a sense of life, to give
Yes.
them any chances to continue their days as their days pass
Mm,
by. I mean, we're in the holy month of Ramadan, where people are fasting until sunset, and
mhm,
yet there is no food entering the Gaza Strip. There is no medication entering the Gaza Strip. The last supply of electricity that was regenerated in Gaza was cut off again. It's not
mm,
like when they say that Israel has cut off the electricity from Gaza now that, oh, there was electricity the past month. No, there was no electricity the past
mhm,
month. And that
mhm.
electricity that was still available now was a little bit of electricity that was available for desalination plants, which is water,
Water,
basically
yes,
drinking water. And that's
yes.
very few amount of electricity that is available in one or two desalination plants that were still not completely destroyed in Gaza. But we're talking about over 2 million people that are now in dire need of every single life necessity. Every single life necessity. We're talking about the most basic necessities of life, which are water and power to generate water and food,
Mhm. Yes,
medical treatment,
absolutely.
adequate medical treatment. So they are being denied these basic necessities. While from the beginning, when this agreement was put, which it was, by the way, the same agreement that was being negotiated for the past 15 months before it was agreed, nothing had changed in that agreement, where it would be in three phases and the time frame of each phase. But finally, after 15 months plus, it was agreed to be signed just after the first phase, when half of the Israeli captives, or over half of the Israeli captives, are out and released. Israel now wants to withdraw from that agreement. It's
Yes.
negotiating whether it should continue with phase one and then resume the bombardment of the Gaza Strip, and does not want to go on with the other terms that were negotiated and that were signed, that were backed up by mediators like Qatar, like Egypt, and like the United States. Now, the United States, that its previous administration had come out many times and spoken about Hamas not wanting to sign a deal, not wanting to reach a ceasefire agreement. Now,
Uh-huh.
we know that in between the lines, and when you read carefully the details of what that agreement that was referred to at that time was, it was not a fair agreement for the Palestinian side,
Uh-huh.
where it had that rule or that condition for Israel to resume the war on the Palestinian
Good
people in
people.
the
Uh-huh.
Gaza Strip. And I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to say it's resuming the war on Hamas, because the only people who are paying the heavy price are the residents. When over 61,000 are killed of the residents,
Mm-hmm.
half of
Mm-hmm.
them, half of that number, more than half of that number, 70% of that number are just women and children,
Children.
then that is a
Absolutely.
war on the population, on the
Civilian.
residents, on the unarmed civilians. And when
Yes.
these unarmed civilians are declined food and water and medical treatment, that's also a war on civilians. So
That's actually a
unless,
continuation of the genocide, I would say, Gaza, because
of course,
in Gaza, Yumna, I would say that, it's a continuation of the genocide by withholding the conditions of life that lead to a genocide. And that's part of the Genocide Convention. Hold that thought, please. We need to go to an ad break, and then we'll be back with you.
They are a duty, a lifeline to many, and your path to endless reward. Be the change with Muslim hands and transform lives across the globe. Together, we can feed the hungry in South Africa and beyond, provide clean water to communities in the most need, empower women with sustainable opportunities across 13 countries, and offer vital relief to families suffering from the conflict in Gaza, Yemen, and Kashmir. This Ramadan, make your generosity count. Be the change today. Visit muslimhands.org.za or call 021 633 6413 to donate today.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning or for that late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating, and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, Now We Cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
This Ramadan, the PSA will again bring Palestinian voices to you. Join us from Monday to Friday at 4:30 p.m. on Salam Media as we bring you authentic grassroots insight on the day-to-day lived experiences of Palestinians and their struggle for justice and equality. Also join our mass iftar at Emerentia Primary School on Saturday, 15 March from 5:30 p.m. Importantly, support our humanitarian aid drive to support healthcare and housing in Gaza. Contributions can be deposited into Palestine Solidarity Alliance, Absa Bank, account 4070101666. Kindly reference regarding Zakah or Lillah. For further information, call 082-513-3750. Join our socials for updates on upcoming events, programs, guests, and podcasts. Contact 082-513-3750.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphire.co.za. www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
This Ramadan, please consider donating to the Islamic Dawah movement. For over 45 years, IDEM has built over 80 masjids and distributed more than 160,000 Qurans in 8 local languages. IDEM has installed over 250 boreholes and water wells. Over 1,000 children are fed daily, building strong Muslim communities in disadvantaged areas. Donate.
Hey Gulam.
Yeah?
Did I return your lawnmower last month?
No, bye, you didn't.
Oh no. Now what'll I do? I wanted to borrow it again, man.
With Randry Jewelers, you won't have to borrow or lend because the prices are so well trimmed on all gold and diamond jewelry. Alternatively, we could remake your old jewelry into a brilliant new design. Visit Randry Jewelers at 151 Stevens Lamini Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randry Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Welcome back, dear listeners and viewers. We're talking to Youmna El-Sayed, Gazan journalist now living in Egypt. And we were talking, Youmna, about the hypocrisy of the Western media, of the Western world more generally, and about the ongoing genocide in Gaza, albeit perhaps not right now in a genocide by the kind of mass bombardment we saw over the last 17 months, but certainly a genocide by the withholding of food, aid, electricity, and clean water. Now, Youmna, the Palestinian Authority has said that its forces have killed a Palestinian fighter in Jenin, whom it describes as an outlaw, but yet Hamas calls the incident a dangerous escalation. This disconnect between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza always makes headlines because I think the powers that be, especially in the legacy media, like to emphasize the so-called feud between the two authorities. But really, in reality, the PA has killed many civilians too, even though it says this person was an outlaw.
Well, I'm not going to, or we can't deny the fact that there has been there have been long years of division between the Fatah, which is the majorly the PA and Hamas for many of years, and especially in the Gaza Strip, where the PA or Fatah was actually governing until the elections, where Hamas won those elections and took over the government, and the PA left or had no more presence left in the Gaza Strip, and since then it has been basically governing the West Bank while Hamas is governing the Gaza Strip. Of course, this division has been fueled for years and years because it's just in favor of so many other parties, and especially the Israeli occupation, when the Palestinian bodies, or the main Palestinian bodies, for parts of the body forming the Palestinian body, are in such a complicated division. The situation remains very complicated between Hamas and Fatah, whether in the West Bank, whether in the Gaza Strip, and in particular when it comes to dealing with Israel, where both parties, each of them has a complete different strategy and policy in dealing with Israel. The PA has always taken the route of diplomacy and negotiations for many, many years. And we've always seen that through President Mahmoud Abbas, through the Riyad Mansour, ambassador of the UN. It has been long years of negotiations, diplomatic negotiations with peace. And while Hamas has chosen to, use the route or take the route of armed resistance, believing that it is the only solution to get or get the right of Palestinians in their lands. Now, looking at these two conditions or these two routes that the Palestinian uh, different authorities have been taken for many years, and over the years, the international community has supported and called out for a two-state solution. It has called out for the Palestinians' right to have their own sovereign land or country with their own sovereignty and with the based borders that were declared in the UN. But for years, in return, Israel, prime minister after prime minister, have been speaking about how much proud they have been to halt and to completely destroy any hopes for a two-state solution. And this has been spoken out very clearly, loud and clear by different Israeli prime ministers coming to government. And yet, the international community has not acknowledged, has not been able to acknowledge in reality. They still tell you an Israeli prime minister like Benjamin Netanyahu lately, the latest, that has said, I'm very proud that until this day I have not allowed for the two-state solution to be implemented. While, for example, the administration, the American administration and the international community would come out at the same time and say, oh, we call for a two-state solution in order for peace to be sustained. But who are they calling for that solution? Because there's only one party here that does not want to implement the two-state solution that would get us to peace, prosperity, and stability of the Palestinians, and not actually implementing it means more stability, more annexation, more land, more occupation to the Israeli side. And yet the international community is still calling for a two-state solution, but could never stand to implement what it has been calling for years.
Indeed, Finance Minister Smotrich spoke, I think, over the weekend about a plan for the evacuation of Gaza, and also spoke about building more settlements in the West Bank. And we've seen that during the short period of the ceasefire, we saw the genocide pretty much exported to the West Bank. The troops that were in Gaza were now going to places like the Jenin refugee camp, like Tulkarem, like East Jerusalem, the Silwan area, etc., and essentially just bulldozing homes, tents, whatever. And indeed, we saw that last week, the Oscar for Best Documentary went to No Other Land. And the same morning, in that same area, Masafariata, there were bulldozers bulldozing homes. So, you go to bed one night hearing and seeing that this Palestinian film has won an Oscar, and controversial as that may be for its Israeli co-director and whatever, it's still a point of pride. And the next morning you wake up to see that Masafariata itself is being, or parts of Masafariata are being bulldozed the very next morning. So there is, as you say, no real commitment by the Israelis to a two-state solution. And the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank continues. I also wanted to touch on Youmna, the fact that the negotiators from various places have headed to Doha now to try and save the Gaza ceasefire deal. What are your thoughts on its chances for success?
I think that it's another very critical time, Aisha, because we are in front of an Israeli government where for many months, the only thing that has kept the Israeli government going on with this genocide was the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, wanted to save the government from collapsing while Minister Smotrich and Minister Ben-Gvir were constantly threatening to pull out from the government and to cause the collapse of the government. And that would mean that Prime Minister Netanyahu would be facing other different legal charges. And this was the main reason why this government was allowed to go on, and so this genocide was allowed to go on. Now the same scenario is re-happening again, where Mr. Smotrich is threatening to pull out in case the second phase starts or the agreement starts. So this, from the beginning, this agreement or so-called agreement for a 3 phases end of the war and release of Israeli captives was implemented on actual reasons that were not true, or on facts that were not true. So it was not really an agreement that they had. Yes, they have agreed on something, but according to the mediators, according to Hamas, it was all this agreement that they need to sign, and they need to go step by step. But to Israel, it was just the fact that we would get the phase 1 implemented, and even with the entering or the amount of supplies and humanitarian aid that was supposed to enter through phase 1 was completely not even half of the amount that was actually supposed to enter, and that in itself is a breaching to the agreement. But now, after the first phase has finished, we're just in the middle of the road, where it's either Benjamin Netanyahu wants to save his government from the collapse and would not go on to reach phase 2, and that just means a more and a worse dire situation for the Palestinian people in Gaza, or they would try to internationally pressure Israel to fulfill its part that it has signed in this agreement, and to continue with this agreement as it is in 3 phases. And we would see there would be a kind of I don't know, like ease to the Palestinians after so long.
After so very long. But I think you're right. The ceasefire deal was never made in good faith by the Israelis. They never meant to uphold it in its entirety. They meant to just cease the genocide for a while. Inshallah, we hope that the negotiations in Doha do actually come out in favor of the Palestinians. But to end off on a rather more positive note, Youmna, one of the positives that we've seen coming from that first phase of the ceasefire agreement was the release of so many long-standing Palestinian prisoners and their reunification with their families in many cases. It was really heartwarming to see the joy and the celebration there, even though even there Israel tried to control the narrative by ordering that the celebrations cease. And so I think that, that is a very joyous thing that happened just before Ramadan, which in itself is a joyous month. We've seen the Gazans prepare for Ramadan, make mass iftars, make mass Taraweeh prayers, etc., amid the devastation and destruction of their homes. And, these are people who've had not one home, but several homes in many cases destroyed, and have been displaced so many times that it becomes almost unendurable. But they're still managing to find some joy. And on that note, Youmna, you are wearing the most beautiful, is that the threes on your outfit? Because I was speaking about the threes today. So maybe we can end today with a little bit of a memory from you on your experience of the threes and what you're wearing right now.
So first of all, let me tell you especially about this one. I had one just like this same shawl
Uh-huh.
that was it's of course it's handmade and it's I actually also got it from Sulafa. Sulafa is an embroidery center that is sponsored by the United Nations in the Gaza Strip, where Palestinian women would come and they would beautifully do the embroidery or tatreez to different shawls, kufiyas, thobes, which are dresses, and different other items. And they could be sold as presents, as souvenirs, and also for usual like Palestinian residents because
Mm-hmm.
wearing something that is traditional like this, whether in weddings, in occasions, is always a very important thing for Palestinians indeed. So I had just a similar one, exactly with the same tatreez and the same color that was a present for my last anniversary before the genocide in Gaza.
Mashallah.
And of course, when I had to flee my home before it was bombarded, and I did not take anything from it, I left it along with every other thing that was in my home and that was embroidered as well. So my dear friend, who is the Palestinian ambassador in Paris, Hala Abu Hasira, she got me this from the same center, Sulafa, and this was hers actually. This was her personal shawl, and
Uh-huh.
she got me her personal shawl as a present, and because it looked exactly like the shawl that I had. So it's very, very dear to
Very
my heart
special. Yes.
for these two reasons, actually, because it's from Hala and because it is also, it reminds me of exactly the same child that I had in so many pictures.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even tell the difference. Every single thread here, every single stitch, as we call
Mm-hmm.
it, is a story. There's a
Uh-huh.
story behind each and every stitch in every Palestinian embroidery, whether
Mm-hmm.
in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, the different cities. The colors, Aisha, they resemble different villages in
Uh-huh.
Palestine, and
Yes.
each tells a story of culture and of heritage for the
Absolutely.
Palestinian people in different
Absolutely.
areas.
What a wonderful story. I'm so sorry for the loss of your original Thorbs, but really heartwarming. And again, an example of Palestinians' generosity, not only to one another, but also to people around the world. Youmna El-Sayed, my dear friend, thank you so much for being with us today. It has been a pleasure, a privilege talking to you. May Allah keep you and bless you and your family, and Ramadan Kareem for the rest of the month to you. Please remember, dear listeners and viewers, that this show between 9 and 10 is brought to you by Africa Muslims Agency. Yumna, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair to you.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Aisha, for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. You just made my day. Thank you.
And you mine. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.